For 10 years, my husband was having an affair with my younger sister in my house. When I found out, I served them a very hot revenge they will never forget in their lives. Before I proceed, dear viewers, kindly subscribe to this channel for more engaging and entertaining stories. Because I will always be sharing with you interesting stories on cheating spouse, and how to handle it with a very deserving revenge. Also like and share this story your loved ones. Now back to my story. My name is Emily Patterson. I'm 42 years old, a mother, a wife, a homeowner in the quiet suburbs of Connecticut, and until a year ago, I believed I had the kind of marriage other women envied. I worked part-time at a local interior design studio, picked up my daughter Ava from school, and cooked dinner by 6 every night. Mark, my husband, worked long hours at a financial firm in Stamford, but he always came home smiling, hugging me like he couldn't wait to walk through the front door. I used to look at him and think, I hit the jackpot. Mark was charming in that safe all-American way. Pressed shirts, clean shave, even-tempered. He knew exactly how I took my coffee and never forgot our anniversary. We'd been married for 16 years, and in my heart, I believed he loved me. I truly did. Then came Chloe, my younger sister. Chloe was always the wild one. She traveled a lot, never stayed in one place, dated guys who wore leather jackets and played in garage bands. But she was still my sister. So, when she called and said she was moving back from Seattle after a breakup, I didn't think twice before inviting her to stay with us, just for a few weeks. She moved in with 3 oversized suitcases and a head full of drama. At first, I thought it was sweet, how Mark went out of his way to make her feel welcome. He'd joke around, pour her wine at dinner, even recommend Netflix shows they could binge together. I chalked it up to him being the good brother-in-law. But then things started to feel off. It was little things at first. Chloe's laundry accidentally showing up mixed in with Mark's, even though she had her own hamper. I caught a whiff of her perfume on his hoodie once and laughed it off, thinking maybe she borrowed it while taking the trash out. I brushed everything under the rug. After all, who would ever think something so vile? One evening I got back from work early. The house was unusually quiet. I found Chloe in the kitchen, wearing one of Mark's t-shirts, hair damp, sipping wine like it was her house. She looked up and smiled like I'd just interrupted a good dream. "You're home early," she said, not startled. Not a trace of guilt. I forced a smile. "Just had a shorter meeting." "Where's Mark?" I shrugged. "Upstairs showering. He got back before you." I wanted to believe they were separate showers. I wanted to believe everything Chloe told me after that, the lies she must have rehearsed while rinsing my husband's sweat off her skin. But doubt had crept in. And once it entered my mind, it made a home there. I started noticing Mark's phone behavior. He never left it lying around anymore. If he did, it was face down. Password changed. One night, I heard the soft buzz of a message while he was in the bathroom. The screen lit up for just a second, and I saw Chloe's name. No last name. No emoji. Just Chloe. I picked up the phone, heart thumping so hard I could barely see straight. Of course, the message was gone by the time I unlocked it. They were using some disappearing message app. Clever. Too clever. I needed proof. Real proof. Something undeniable. So I waited. A week later, Mark left for a conference in Boston. Chloe stayed home with me and Ava, acting like everything was normal. But something about her felt distant that weekend, like her mind was with him. Late Saturday night, I peeked into her room. She was asleep or pretending to be. Her phone was charging on the nightstand. I shouldn't have, but I did. Took it. Went into the bathroom. Locked the door. My hands were trembling. Her passcode was Ava's birthday. How poetic. Within seconds I was in. What I saw made my stomach turn. Photos. Messages. Videos. 10 years worth. In years. They joked about how clueless I was. Shared memories of my birthday dinners, our anniversaries, vacations. While I smiled in the photos, they were screwing behind my back. In my house. In my bed even. Mark called her baby girl. Chloe called him my forever. They were planning to get matching tattoos. God help me, it was the date of my wedding. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, unable to breathe through the rage tightening around my chest. How do you walk past someone who's stolen your life and smile like you don't know? I woke up the next morning, made breakfast, packed Ava's lunch, kissed her on the forehead, and drove her to school like nothing had changed. But something had. Everything had. I was done being the perfect wife. I was about to become the woman they never saw coming. That Monday morning I called in sick to work. Not because I was sick, but because I needed space. I needed to sit in the stillness of my home and plan. If I confronted them without a strategy, I'd just become a shattered woman screaming into the void while they gaslit me into a breakdown. I walked through my house like it was a crime scene. My kitchen, the same one where Chloe used to sit, legs crossed on the counter while I made dinner. My living room, where Mark and I had curled up on the couch during lockdown, laughing at old sitcoms. I wondered how many of those nights had been shared, duplicated, repeated with her when I wasn't looking. Years. I kept repeating it like a chant. That was longer than Ava had been alive. That was longer than Chloe's last 3 relationships combined. What kind of woman betrays her sister like that, for a decade, and smiles through Christmas dinners? When Ava came home from school, I was back to being mom. I helped with her homework, made her favorite mac and cheese, and tucked her in with a forehead kiss. Then I waited. Chloe came downstairs around 10. She always slept in late. She walked into the kitchen barefoot, scrolling through her phone, wearing a robe I'd bought her last Christmas. "You good?" she asked casually. "Peachy," I said, sipping my tea. "Cool. I might go out later." "Need anything?" "Just your conscience, Chloe." But I said, "Nope, I'm good. Have fun." She left around noon. I waited until she was gone, then checked her location on Ava's iPad. She'd synced it a while ago when babysitting. She was headed into the city. Mark was still in Boston. Except he wasn't. I called his office from a blocked number. "Mark Patterson, please." A polite assistant said, "Mark's out of office all week. He's attending a seminar in California." California. I stared at the phone. The bile rose in my throat. He was lying so easily. It was muscle memory for him by now. Lies came naturally to a man who lived in 2 truths. I knew what to do. That evening I reached out to Lauren Pierce, my longtime friend from college, now a digital marketing manager who happened to dabble in surveillance tech. She'd helped her own sister catch a cheating husband last year. I told her everything. Lauren didn't flinch. "We'll get proof. You need full evidence, not emotional bits. You want to corner them. You make sure they can't wiggle out." I was silent. Then I said, "Let's do it." Within 3 days, Lauren had helped me install a camera behind a vent in our guest room, Chloe's room. It was motion sensor, voice activated, and hidden in plain sight. I didn't have to wait long. On Friday evening, Mark returned from his trip. I acted delighted to see him. Cooked steak. Poured wine. Ava was at a sleepover. Chloe came down in a skin-tight dress, hair done up, pretending to be going out. "You look great," Mark said with a wink. He thought I didn't notice. I pretended not to either. That night, I told Mark I was taking a long bath and slipped out of the house instead. I parked 2 blocks away and watched the camera feed on my phone from Lauren's app. By 10:37 p.m., Chloe opened her door in a silk robe. Mark stepped in with a bottle of wine. She giggled. He whispered something. They kissed. And then they did more than kiss. In my home. In her room. While I sat there, watching them like some ghost mother mourning a life that had never really existed. But strangely, I didn't cry. Not even once. I just felt hollow. Like the final nail had been hammered into a coffin that had been waiting to be sealed for years. Lauren said, "You sure you want to keep watching? I've seen enough." I drove back home and slept in Ava's room that night, just in case they got suspicious. Mark was already back in bed when I returned. He kissed my forehead like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just betrayed every sacred thing between us for the 1000th time. But he was predictable. And I was patient. The next day, I saved the video to a secure drive and mailed a copy to my lawyer with instructions. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to ruin them, together. By Sunday morning, Chloe was all smiles again. We went to brunch with Ava. She joked about how single life in her 30s was chaos, and I almost choked on my mimosa. She caught my eye and smirked like she knew she was winning. That's when I knew, this wasn't love. This was a game to her. A game of one-upmanship, of control, of conquest. Well, game on, darling. Mark handed me his phone during brunch to show me a meme. And just like that, I had it in my hand. I airdropped the video from the cloud to his phone while he wasn't looking. Didn't even need a password, just airdrop from my backup. I watched his face when the video autoplayed later that night in the living room. I'd renamed it Dinner Plans, and attached a thumbnail of a salad plate. Chloe was upstairs. Ava was asleep. Mark's face turned white. He looked at me. Emily, I can explain. I took a long sip of wine. I know, sweetheart. But I'd rather show you. Mark just sat there, frozen. Phone still in his hand, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. I didn't flinch. I didn't scream. I didn't ask him why or how or when. I already knew all of it. I had watched it. I had felt it. 10 years worth of betrayal compressed into a few minutes of grainy footage. Emily, he whispered. This isn't what you think. I tilted my head. Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my husband has been sleeping with my sister for a decade. In our house. While I was home. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I don't want to hear your lies anymore. I just wanted you to see what I see. The truth. Raw and ugly. He ran his hand through his hair, pacing the living room. We didn't mean for it to go this far. It just happened. I let out a small, bitter laugh. 10 years, Mark. That's not an accident. That's a lifestyle. Upstairs I heard a door creak. Right on cue. Chloe stood on the landing, holding her phone. She must have gotten the message too. I'd scheduled it to send to her an hour after Mark's airdrop. Just enough time to twist the knife properly. Her eyes met mine. No fake smile. No playful deflection. Just fear. Pure, sobering fear. I stood up and walked to the bottom of the stairs. Did you like playing house with my husband, Chloe? Was it fun pretending to be me when I wasn't around? She tried to speak. Am I? You were my sister, I said, voice calm but cracking under the weight of disgust. You held Ava as a baby. You stood beside me at my wedding. How could you do this to me? She stepped down slowly. It was never about hurting you. I fell in love with him. I nodded slowly. Good. Because you're going to need that love where you're going. Mark narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out a folder I'd had sealed and ready since yesterday. I handed it to him. Inside were divorce papers, photos, bank statements, copies of the video. I've already filed. Everything you own jointly with me is being reviewed. And by the way, your little affair cost you your job. Your company just received an anonymous tip with a video attached. It's currently circulating HR. He blanched. You didn't. Oh, I did. He turned to Chloe, suddenly panicked. You knew she had this. She looked lost. I didn't know she saw it. You didn't think I'd ever notice, did you? I said, turning to her now. You thought you were smarter, prettier, sexier, younger, and maybe you are. But what I am is done. Mark looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 minutes. But Ava, please think about Ava, he said, reaching for me. I stepped back. You should have thought about Ava the first time you kissed my sister. Or the 100th time. You don't get to play the family man card now. He sat down, head in his hands. I turned to Chloe. And as for you, pack your things. You have until tomorrow morning to be out of my house. Her mouth fell open. But I have nowhere to go. Not my problem anymore. She hesitated, maybe expecting me to soften. I didn't. I walked out of the room and went to Ava's bedroom. She was still asleep, peaceful, untouched by the chaos that had just detonated downstairs. I watched her for a long time, hand gently resting on her back as she breathed. I kept my cool for her. Not for them. Never for them. The next morning, Chloe's things were gone. She didn't say goodbye. Mark left too. He said he'd give me space, but I knew he was just running. That's what men like him did when things got real. I wasn't surprised. But I wasn't broken either. 3 weeks later, my lawyer confirmed the divorce process was moving fast, thanks to the mountain of evidence and the adultery clause in our prenup, something Mark forgot existed when he got too comfortable. Chloe, I heard through a mutual cousin, was couch surfing with some guy she used to date. I didn't care. Let her face the consequences of sleeping her way into my life. But my revenge wasn't just legal. It was emotional. You see, I had been a ghost in my own life for years. Quiet, accommodating, making space for everyone else to shine. While they plotted behind closed doors, I made sacrifices. While they whispered lies, I carried responsibilities. Now I was done playing small. I redid the house. Painted the bedroom. Threw out the old bedsheets, the towels, the dishes, anything they may have touched together. I even sold the guest bed. Lauren and I went out for wine one night and toasted to clean slates and brutal justice. She smiled. You know, I think this was the best revenge I've ever seen. It wasn't revenge, I said quietly. It was rebirth. And I meant it. I didn't expect freedom to feel so loud. Every room in the house echoed now. No Chloe laughing too hard at her own jokes. No Mark clinking his glass with mine during dinner. Just silence. But not the sad kind. It was the kind that stretches its arms and breathes deeply. Finally alone, finally at peace. I started waking up earlier. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd sit by the window with coffee, wrapped in my softest robe, and just exist. It had been so long since I'd heard my own thoughts without someone else's needs drowning them out. Ava adjusted faster than I thought she would. I kept things honest but age-appropriate. I told her Daddy had made some bad choices, and Mommy was taking care of things. She asked if he'd still come to her school events. I said yes, if he shows up you wave. If he doesn't, that's not your fault. One night while brushing her teeth, she looked at me through the mirror and said, "You smile more now, Mom." I nearly cried right there. But I didn't. I just nodded. "I feel lighter," I whispered. She grinned. "You look it too." I decided to keep the Patterson last name, not because I owed it to him, but because it belonged to Ava now. My identity wasn't in a surname. It was in how I walked into every room after surviving what I did. Mark tried calling a few times after the dust settled. Voicemails full of regret, slow-paced apologies, desperate lines like, "I don't know who I was back then." I deleted everyone. Then, one Wednesday morning I got a delivery. No note. Just a large, sleek box tied with a navy blue ribbon. Inside was an expensive wristwatch. Limited edition. Engraved with "Always yours, M." Smiled. Not the sweet kind. The kind with teeth. I returned it the same day. Sent it to his office address with a sticky note. "Time's up." And Chloe. She made the mistake of showing up at my door 2 months later. She looked thinner, like the weight of her choices was finally pressing into her bones. I didn't let her in. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking straight. I crossed my arms, leaning on the doorframe. You weren't thinking at all. I've lost everything, she whispered, eyes wet. I miss you. I miss Ava. You don't miss me, I said flatly. You miss the version of me that let you sleep peacefully under my roof while you slept with my husband. She wiped her face. Please. One chance. I need my sister back. I studied her for a long moment. And then I shook my head. You buried her, Chloe. 10 years ago. Closed the door. And just like that, the final thread connecting me to that old life snapped. I didn't feel grief. Felt clarity. After everything, I'd learned something radical. You don't owe anyone forgiveness just because they share your blood. That night, I lit a small fire in the backyard fire pit. The sky was clear, stars blinking above like they were watching me start over. I burned the last printed photos of Mark and Chloe, those sunny family barbecues, the smiling Christmas mornings. Ava was inside watching a movie. I didn't want her to see this part. This was my private funeral. Not for them but for who I used to be. I watched the flames eat away at the pictures, curling their smiles into ash. Then I poured a glass of wine, curled up in a blanket, and sat by the fire until it went out. In that glow I wasn't sad. I was becoming. I joined a local hiking group. Lauren introduced me to them. Her way of getting me out of my fortress of solitude. And I loved it. The fresh air. The sound of leaves crunching beneath my boots. The ache in my thighs that reminded me I was alive. One Saturday we hiked a trail up near Bear Mountain. That's where I met Dean. He wasn't flashy. No polished charm or well-rehearsed compliments. He just noticed I was shivering and offered his flannel. We talked about trail mix of all things. He made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in what felt like years. When we got back to the parking lot, he said, "Can I walk you to your car?" I hesitated, then nodded. At my door he smiled and said, "I'm not trying to jump ahead here. I'd really like to see you again." Something in his tone told me he meant it. No games. No pretense. I looked at him and said, "I'd like that too." I didn't tell him my full story right away. I didn't need to. Because for the first time I wasn't trying to prove I was worth loving. Already knew. And that changed everything. 3 months after that night by the fire pit, I looked around my life and saw something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from silence or isolation, but the kind that hums beneath your skin. Like steady waves against the shore. It was a Monday morning. The house smelled like cinnamon toast and citrus cleaner. Ava sat at the kitchen island, scribbling her science homework, hair in a messy bun. I was prepping her lunch while humming something by Fleetwood Mac. I caught my reflection in the microwave door. I looked soft again. Not defeated, not bitter. Just settled. Mark's name still popped up now and then. Mutual friends would mention he'd been fired officially, and Chloe had left town, apparently chasing some artist boyfriend in Portland. I didn't care. They were both ghosts in my world now. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't nostalgic either. Some chapters close themselves when you stop turning back to reread them. One Saturday, Dean invited Ava and me to a fall fair in town. I wasn't sure about bringing him into her world just yet, but she'd heard me mention him before and lit up when I told her. "Is that the hiking guy with the flannel?" she asked, grinning. I laughed. "Yes, that's the one." "Well," she said, "he has good taste in trail mix." At the fair, Dean was warm and patient. He didn't try too hard. He let Ava lead him through every booth. Let her explain the difference between caramel apples and candied ones like it was top secret information. At one point she looked at me, eyes shining, and said, "He's cool, Mom." And in that moment my heart ached, but in a beautiful way. Like I was healing in places I didn't know had been broken. Dean never asked about Mark directly. He never pried. But one evening over dinner at a small Italian place, he looked at me and said, "I don't know who hurt you, but I want you to know I'm not trying to fix you. I just want to walk beside you wherever you're headed." I put down my fork, blinked hard, and nodded. That's when I realized. This was what safety felt like. It wasn't in the grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was in being seen without being studied. Loved without being weighed. I didn't need a knight. I just needed someone who respected that I already survived the battle. Over time things found their rhythm. Dean became a friend to Ava, not a replacement. Mark had supervised visits once a month, which he handled quietly. I no longer flinched at his name. He was simply Ava's father now. No longer my mistake. No longer my burden. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done in years. I even submitted an article to a local women's magazine about resilience, and to my surprise it was published. The editor called it fierce and sobering. Funny. That's how I'd describe the whole journey. Fierce and sobering. Strange how something meant to destroy you can become the very thing that shapes your power. Sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's a quiet kitchen on a Thursday night. Your child laughing from the living room. A man humming as he does the dishes. It's trust built in small, ordinary moments. It's waking up and not checking your partner's phone. It's sleeping in your bed and knowing no one else has touched it behind your back. It's forgiving yourself for not seeing it sooner. The last part was the hardest. I had spent years questioning myself, doubting every instinct. I remember one therapy session where my counselor, Julia, said something that stuck with me. Emily, the betrayal wasn't your failure. It was theirs. Your kindness was not a flaw. And finally I believed it. Now every now and then I speak at a women's group downtown. Not to tell them how to catch a cheater, but to remind them that there is life, beautiful life, after heartbreak. After one of those sessions, a woman approached me, probably mid-50s, eyes tired. "Didn't you ever want to destroy them?" she asked. Smiled. "I did," I said. And then I realized, nothing destroys them more than watching you heal without them. She nodded slowly. Tears welled up. Hugged her. And it hit me all over again. My revenge wasn't in the video, the exposure, or the exit. It was in the becoming. It was in the wholeness. In the joy. In choosing myself and meaning it.